Hello and welcome to this tutorial. We're going to talk about the use of secondary IP addresses on Cisco devices. Now, up until now, most of the tutorials have just used single IP addresses on interfaces because really, that's all we needed to do. However, the fact of the matter is, you can assign multiple IP addresses to a single interface on Cisco routers and switches. Now, after you configure the first one, each of the additional IP addresses is commonly referred to as secondary IP addresses. You can add not just a second one, but you can add a third one, a fourth one, and a fifth one. All of them, after the first one, are all called secondary addresses, and you'll see why that is when we look at the configuration example. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, why would you do this? What's the point? There could be a couple of reasons, but usually the most common reason is you've assigned an IP address to an interface for a particular network segment, and you have a bunch of hosts on that segment, and you've used up all of the available IPs, but you still need to keep growing. So you have to make some kind of change. So let's take an example of this. On this network, we originally started off with this IP network assigned to Fast Ethernet 01. And this cloud represents all of the devices in that subnet along with these two PCs. Well, over time, we used it all up, but we have to add more devices. Well, you might be thinking, well, why don't I just expand the subnet mask and make this a /23 or even a /22? Oftentimes in production environments, IP allocations are used up. So you might go for the next available subnet in order to have a contiguous assignment so you can combine them together. But this 10.10.11.0/24, it might have already been assigned somewhere else in the network, so it's not available to be used. So you look for one that is available. And let's say this is the next available IP subnet we can use. So what we would do is we would assign this second subnet to Fast Ethernet 00. So we're creating just two logical subnets, although there's only one physical interface. And the devices that are now connected on FA00, some of them could be in the original subnet, while all of the new devices, let's say this one here, would belong to the new subnet. So that way you're still able to grow and you don't have to disrupt all of the work you've done in setting up your current network. Keep in mind, when you're running like this, if a host is in this network, like PCA, and let's say another host is in your original network, let's say that's PCB, if they want to talk to each other, unfortunately, they have to go to the router and then back. And that's because these are different subnets. Remember that. So a router is needed in order to route between them. And in fact, the default gateways for each of these devices would be configured in their respective subnets. Okay, so that's an overview of why you might want to do this and how it would look and function. Let's go ahead and actually configure this. Keep in mind that you're not limited to configuring secondary IP addresses on physical interfaces only. You can also add them to VLAN interfaces as well. We're going to add a secondary IP address to FA01, and you can see it already has a primary address. So the process is almost identical to adding any normal single IP address. We go into the interface and we use the same command, IP address. This time it's 12.1. We add our subnet mask. And at this point we have a very important parameter to add, and that is the word secondary. Now if you don't add this parameter, what you'll end up doing is you'll overwrite the existing IP address on the interface. And that could have unintended consequences. You could cause an outage that way. So be careful. Always remember to add that secondary parameter. Okay, so this looks good. And let's take a look at the new interface configuration, and there you can see it's listed with the secondary parameter. If I added a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth IP address, they would all have the secondary parameter on them. So it doesn't mean it's the second one, it means it's a multiple one. Okay? One of many. So let's now take a look at the IP route table. A good command in order to check out all of your connected routes is show IP route connected. And here you can see both of our subnets are directly connected to the router, and they're stating Fast Ethernet 01. So connected routes are added automatically to the IP route table. These would disappear if the interface was administratively shut down, or if it failed and it wasn't up, or if you obviously removed both of these IP subnets from the interface, they would no longer appear in the IP route table as well. Well, this all looks great. Let's cover one peculiarity about secondary IP addresses you should be aware of. Let's say now we wanted to remove the original IP address, the 10.10.1, the one that was on there when we first logged in. Watch what happens. We'll go back into the interface and we'll say no IP address 10.10.10.1. It's telling us we must delete the secondary before deleting the primary. So this can cause a bit of a headache if you add a secondary and then down the road maybe you've migrated all of your hosts to the secondary subnet, and then you want to get rid of the original one. You're not going to be able to do that unless you remove all of the secondary IP addresses, and then you can remove the primary or the original IP address. Okay, so keep that in mind and plan carefully. Okay, to summarize what we covered, we now know that we can put many secondary IP addresses on a single interface, and some of the reasons to do that are to expand our subnet so we can add more hosts, or to migrate to a larger subnet. The command we want to use is the IP address command, but we include the secondary parameter at the end, and make sure you do that. It's really important. After you've done this, you can go ahead and confirm your work by checking out the Show IP Route Connected command, and this will show you all of your connected subnets to a router. And finally, remember, if you want to remove a primary IP address, you're going to first have to remove all of your secondary IP addresses before the router will let you remove the primary. Okay, so that's it. That is using secondary IP addresses. Thanks for watching.